I never thought I'd be that woman. You know the type, the one who sneaks around behind her husband's back, who betrays not just her marriage but an entire community's trust. Yet here I am, sitting in my car outside Tommy's school, trying to figure out how to tell my 10-year-old son that his world is about to shatter because his mother couldn't keep her promises. It started innocently enough, like these things always do. Jack's auto repair shop was struggling. Detroit isn't what it used to be. And even though he and Mike were the best mechanics in our neighborhood, bills were piling up faster than customers were coming in. Jack started working longer hours, 7 days a week sometimes, trying to keep the shop afloat. I understood. I really did. We had a mortgage to pay, Tommy's school expenses, and my waitressing job at Mel's Diner barely covered groceries. Mike would come over sometimes, bringing Sarah's lasagna, or helping me with house repairs when Jack was too busy. He'd sit at our kitchen table, drinking coffee and listening to me complain about how lonely I was, how Jack barely looked at me anymore except to ask if I'd paid the electric bill. Mike understood. Sarah worked 2 retail jobs, and they were having their own problems. I remember the first time something changed between us. It was a Tuesday in March, and the heat in our house had gone out. Jack was stuck at the shop with a major repair job, so he sent Mike over to check our furnace. I was in the basement with him, holding a flashlight while he worked. "You deserve better than this, Em," he said suddenly, not looking at me. "Jack's my best friend, but he's taking you for granted." "We're just going through a rough patch," I defended weakly, but even I didn't believe it anymore. Mike turned then, and in the dim light of the flashlight, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in Jack's for years: desire, appreciation, need. Before I could stop myself, I was kissing him, or maybe he was kissing me. The flashlight clattered to the floor, rolling away and casting wild shadows on the basement walls. We pulled apart quickly, both horrified at what we'd done. Mike left without fixing the furnace, and I spent the night huddled under 3 blankets, alternating between guilt and an electric thrill I hadn't felt in years. The next week at the shop's monthly barbecue, I couldn't look Sarah in the eye. She was showing everyone pictures of the dress she'd bought for their upcoming 20th anniversary celebration, and there I was, knowing I'd kissed her husband. Mike avoided me too, staying close to Sarah and laughing too loudly at Jack's bad jokes. But avoidance in a small community is impossible. We kept running into each other, at the grocery store, at Tommy's school events, at the shop. Each time the tension grew thicker. We started finding excuses to be alone together. A quick kiss turned into heated encounters in his truck behind the shop. Secret meetings at a motel off-highway when we were supposedly running errands. I told myself it wasn't really hurting anyone. Jack was too absorbed in his work to notice my absences. Sarah was always at one job or another. We were careful, discreet. Mike made me feel alive again, desired, appreciated. When we were together, I could forget about the unpaid bills, the growing distance between Jack and me, the guilt that ate at my stomach every time I looked at Tommy. But secrets have a way of suffocating you slowly. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment everything started to unravel. It was during Tommy's school play. He was playing George Washington in the 5th grade history production. Jack had promised to be there, but at the last minute, a customer's transmission emergency kept him at the shop. Mike came instead, saying he'd record it for Jack. After the play, while Tommy was changing out of his costume, Mike and I sneaked behind the school auditorium. Just a quick kiss, we told ourselves. But Tommy had finished changing earlier than expected and came looking for us. He saw everything. My 10-year-old son stood there, still wearing his powdered wig, staring at his mom kissing his Uncle Mike. The look on his face, confusion, betrayal, hurt, it haunts me still. He ran before either of us could explain. Not that there was any explanation that would have made sense to a child. "Tommy, wait!" I called after him, but he was already gone, disappearing into the crowd of parents and students. We found him sitting in Mike's truck, crying silently. He wouldn't look at either of us. "Please don't tell Dad," I begged him on the drive home, "or Aunt Sarah. It was a mistake, honey. It won't happen again." Tommy didn't say a word. He went straight to his room and locked the door. I heard him crying through the wall that night, and every muffled sob felt like a knife in my chest. The next few weeks were torture. Tommy barely spoke to me or Mike. He started asking to stay at friends' houses more often, avoiding family dinners. Jack noticed the change but attributed it to preteen angst. Sarah mentioned that Tommy seemed different at their house too, quieter during the weekly Sunday dinners our families had shared for years. Mike and I tried to end it then. We really did. But like addicts seeking one last fix, we kept finding reasons to meet. We need to talk about Tommy, we'd say, or just one last time. Each last time led to another and another. Then came the text message that changed everything. I'd been careless, leaving my phone unlocked on the kitchen counter while I took a shower. Jack rarely touched my phone, but that day he needed to check an invoice he'd sent me earlier. The message from Mike popped up, "Missing you. Last night was amazing. Same time next week?" I got out of the shower to find Jack sitting at the kitchen table, my phone in his hands, looking like someone had just died. In a way, something had, his trust, our marriage, 15 years of friendship with Mike. "How long?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. "Jack, I can explain. How long?" The roar made me jump. I'd never heard him raise his voice like that before. 6 months, I whispered. He laughed then, a horrible broken sound. 6 months, half a year of lying to my face, both of you. He stood up suddenly, sending his chair crashing to the floor. "Where's Tommy?" "At Kevin's house for a sleepover." "Did he know? Is that why he's been so strange lately?" I couldn't lie anymore. He saw us, at his school play. Jack's face crumpled. "My God, Emily. Our son? You made our son keep this secret?" He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "To kill my best friend," he said simply, and slammed the door behind him. I called Mike immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "He knows. Jack's coming. He knows everything." There was a long silence on the other end. "I'll handle it," Mike finally said. "It's time to face the music." I wanted to rush to the shop to prevent whatever was about to happen, but my legs wouldn't move. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the family photos on our wall. Jack and me on our wedding day, young and full of dreams. Tommy's first birthday, all 3 of us covered in cake frosting. The grand opening of Turner Amp, Davidson Auto Repair, Jack and Mike standing proudly in front of their new shop, arms around each other's shoulders like brothers. An hour passed, then 2. I called both their phones repeatedly, but neither answered. Finally, around midnight, there was a knock at the door. It was Sarah, her eyes red and swollen. "They're at the hospital," she said flatly. "They beat each other bloody in the shop." One of the neighbors heard the commotion and called the police. My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor. Sarah didn't move to help me up. "How long have you been sleeping with my husband, Emily?" The question hung in the air between us. Sarah and I had been friends since high school, long before either of us met Jack or Mike. We'd been each other's bridesmaids, held each other's hands during labor, shared every secret, except this one. 6 months, I whispered for the second time that night. She nodded slowly. "You know what the worst part is? I suspected something. The late nights, the weird excuses, the way he couldn't look me in the eye anymore. But I told myself I was being paranoid, because my husband would never do that to me, and my best friend would never betray me like that. Sarah, I'm so sorry, don't." She held up her hand. "Just don't. I came to tell you about the hospital because Tommy's at my house, and he's terrified. He heard about the fight from Kevin's mom. He needs his mother, although God knows why after what you've put him through." I grabbed my keys and followed Sarah to her car. The drive to her house was silent, heavy with 15 years of friendship crumbling to dust between us. Tommy was sitting on Sarah's porch, hugging his knees to his chest. When he saw me, he started crying. "Is Dad okay?" he asked. "And Uncle Mike?" "They're in the hospital, buddy," I said, reaching for him. He flinched away from my touch. "This is all my fault," he sobbed. "If I'd told Dad when I saw you and Uncle Mike, maybe." "No, Tommy," Sarah cut in firmly. "None of this is your fault. This is about adults making terrible choices and hurting the people they're supposed to love." Her words hit me like physical blows. She was right. We'd put an impossible burden on a child, made him complicit in our betrayal. At the hospital, we found Jack and Mike in separate rooms. Jack had a broken nose, 2 cracked ribs, and needed stitches above his eye. Mike's jaw was fractured, and his right hand was broken from punching a wall. The police were there too, taking statements. Neither Jack nor Mike pressed charges against each other. Their last act of friendship, I suppose. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, moving boxes, and whispered conversations around the neighborhood. News travels fast in working-class communities like ours. People took sides, as people do. Most sided with Jack and Sarah, of course. I lost my job at Mel's Diner. The owner said my situation was bad for business. Even my regular customers, people I'd served coffee to for years, stopped meeting my eyes. Mike moved out of his and Sarah's house the day after the hospital. He rented a room above Joe's bar on the east side of town. I heard he tried to keep working at the shop, but Jack bought him out, took out a second mortgage to do it. Now Mike works at some chain auto repair place in the next town over. Jack filed for divorce immediately. His lawyer was brutal, bringing up my affair in every meeting, suggesting I was an unfit mother because I'd involved Tommy in the deception. I didn't fight too hard. The guilt made me agree to less than I probably should have, but how could I demand more after what I'd done? We agreed to joint custody of Tommy, but he chose to live primarily with Jack. "Dad needs me more right now," he said, trying to sound grown up, "and the house is closer to school." We both knew those weren't the real reasons, but I accepted them anyway. Sarah filed for divorce too. She got almost everything: the house, the car, most of their savings. Mike didn't contest any of it. Word is she's dating someone from her church now, someone safe and reliable who writes devotional poetry and volunteers at the homeless shelter. I moved into a small apartment across town, took a waitressing job at a truck stop off the highway. The tips aren't as good as they were at Mel's, but at least nobody there knows my story. Yet. Mike called me a few times talking about starting fresh somewhere else, maybe moving to Cleveland where his cousin could get him work. But the passion that had seemed so urgent, so worth any risk, had burned itself out. We'd destroyed too much to build anything on the ashes. Tommy stays with me every other weekend. Those first few visits were awkward, filled with long silences and careful conversations. He'd check his phone constantly, texting his dad to make sure he was okay. I'd catch him staring at me sometimes with a look that broke my heart, like he was trying to reconcile the mother he'd known with the woman who'd blown up his world. One night, about 3 months after everything fell apart, Tommy had a nightmare at my apartment. He crawled into my bed like he used to when he was little, and in the dark he finally talked about it all. "I was so angry at you, Mom," he whispered. "I still am sometimes, but I miss how things used to be. I miss Sunday dinners with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike. I miss when Dad used to laugh. I miss you being home." I held him while he cried, my own tears falling into his hair. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I ruined everything. Dad says people make mistakes," he said after a while. "Even big ones. He says the important thing is what you do after." That conversation was a turning point. Tommy started talking to me more, sharing things about school and his friends. He even invited me to his baseball games, though I sit far away from Jack and pretend not to notice when other parents whisper and point. A year has passed since that night Jack found the text message. The seasons have changed, wounds have started to heal, and life has found new rhythms. Not better ones, necessarily, but different. Jack's shop is doing well now. He hired a young mechanic to replace Mike, and word is he's dating one of the teachers from Tommy's school. Tommy tells me she's nice, helps him with his math homework sometimes. The thought of another woman in my old kitchen, sitting in my chair, loving my son, it hurts, but I've lost the right to those feelings. I ran into Mike at the grocery store last month. He's lost weight, looks older somehow. We stood awkwardly in the cereal aisle, shopping baskets hanging heavy in our hands. "How are you?" he asked. "Managing," I replied. "You?" "Same. Sarah's getting remarried in the spring," I heard. Tommy mentioned it. There was so much more to say, but what would be the point? We'd said it all in stolen moments and secret meetings, and look where that got us. In the end, we just nodded goodbye and walked away in opposite directions. The hardest part isn't the loneliness or the gossip or even the guilt. It's watching Tommy navigate this new reality we've created for him. He's growing up too fast, learning hard lessons about trust and betrayal that no child should have to learn from their own parents. Last week, he had a school assignment about heroes. He chose to write about his dad. Not because he's perfect, he read aloud during our weekend together, but because he taught me that being strong sometimes means forgiving people who hurt you, even if you can't forget what they did. I cried when he showed me the A+ marked in red at the top of the paper. My son is becoming a better person than I ever was. Sarah still won't speak to me, though we sometimes end up at the same school events. She holds her head high, ignores me completely. I don't blame her. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. Jack and I communicate mostly through text messages now, short exchanges about Tommy's schedule or school needs. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of the man I married, like when he let me join them for Tommy's birthday dinner at his favorite pizza place, or when he sent me photos from Tommy's first baseball game of the season. Small mercies I don't deserve but am grateful for nonetheless. I'm seeing a therapist now, trying to understand why I was willing to risk everything for an affair that in retrospect seems more about escape than love. She says it's common in long-term relationships to mistake excitement for happiness, to chase the thrill of something new instead of fixing what's broken. She's probably right, but understanding the why doesn't undo the damage. Last night, I drove past our old house. The lights were on, and I could see Jack and Tommy through the kitchen window, probably working on Tommy's science project. They were laughing about something. The sight made me remember all the family dinners we'd had in that kitchen, all the ordinary moments I'd taken for granted. People say time heals all wounds, but I don't think that's true. Some wounds leave scars that never fade. The best we can hope for is to learn from them, to become better people because of them, to make sure the pain serves some purpose. Tommy asked me recently if I still love his dad. I told him the truth, that I'll always love the family we were, the life we had, even if I'm the one who destroyed it. He seemed to understand in that wise beyond his years way he's developed. Maybe that's what growing up is, he said. Learning to live with the things we can't fix. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. So here I am, sitting outside Tommy's school, watching other mothers chat and laugh together, planning bake sales and soccer schedules. I'm no longer one of them. I'm the cautionary tale they whisper about at PTA meetings. But I'm still here, still trying to be the mother my son deserves, still hoping that somewhere in this mess of consequences and regret, there's a path to redemption, because that's what growing up really is. Learning to live with our mistakes, and trying our damnedest not to make the same ones twice.